Base stations are really cool. The ability to have what is essentially perfect tracking no matter what weird way you move your body while ERPing in VR chat is a technological marvel, if it was an easy setup.
Secure one bracket at one corner of the play area. After securing the first wall mount, secure the other bracket at the opposite corner.
It's not an easy setup. They're expensive, they require you to drill holes in your fucking wall, and overall it can be a bit of a nightmare. Regardless though, at the end of the day, base stations are king when it comes to tracking quality. But times have changed. What was once considered the ultimate VR setup is now becoming a relic of the past. And while that is ultimately a good thing for the future of VR, it is still quite sad to see considering just how good base stations still are. Today, we're going to be delving deep into the whole life of base stations and exploring how they ultimately got to where they are now. From the only way to play VR properly, to the high-end option, to what they are today. Outdated. So without further ado, let's start from the first camera-based tracking solution. Base stations were a part of the first consumer-grade VR headset, being the HTC Vive. At the time, there simply were no better tracking alternatives than tracking cameras, and that didn't seem like it was going to change anytime soon. And it didn't. Meta, which was Oculus at the time, also adopted the outside-in camera style tracking for their first headset, the Oculus Rift, and that was pretty much considered a requirement for good VR. Although a big-ass hassle, once set up, base stations killed it and very shortly became the premier way to enjoy VR games. Even Sony had an outside-in camera setup with the PSVR 1, requiring that and shitty PS3 Move controllers from 2010 that generally sucked ass for VR and could hardly track, but on a technical level, it did get the job done, sort of, I guess. There were a lot of PSVR kiddies in Rec Room when I played, so clearly somebody fucking liked it. But outside-in tracking, or camera-based tracking, while absolutely stellar when correctly set up and not used on a PlayStation VR, it was simply not a realistic solution for a lot of people. Like, just look at this base station setup video from Vive back in the day. This is an official guide. You cannot possibly expect the average consumer to start fucking drilling holes in their walls to play games like Beat Saber and Job Simulator, especially not when the cost to get in VR was already so expensive. The hope is that part of that luxury price would be that it's easy to set up, but this shit was anything but. So fast forward 2 years to 2018, and now we have a new Oculus product coming up. The big gimmick here being how consumer friendly it is. It's sort of affordable, there's no base stations required, there's no PC required, and of course, I'm talking about the iconic Oculus Go. Yeah, not the Quest yet. The Oculus Go fucking sucks. The technology back then simply couldn't supply an actual full VR experience within a reasonable price, and this product, while it was kind of cool, I guess, ultimately either solidified to the average person that VR is still like that cardboard thing you put your phone into, or to the more knowledgeable person that VR cannot be good without base stations and a PC. And this was the consensus going forward. Good VR needs outside-in tracking. Anything else sucks and is for stupid pussies who play baby games like Minecraft and VR roller coaster sims, not for the hardcore VR gamer who plays real VR games like fucking Job Simulator and Robo Recall. Side note, what the fuck do you know about Robo Recall? This was where VR peaked in 2017. The game is kind of mediocre in the modern day though, but it released on my birthday so it gets brownie points. So with our new gold standard of the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive having outside-in cameras that were necessary for a great experience, Oculus announced their next cutting-edge headset, the Oculus Rift S. Running at a lower refresh rate, switching to LCD instead of the currently loved OLED, and most importantly, ditching the Rift's camera-based tracking, instead going for inside-out tracking, which were cameras put on the headset that handled the tracking like what we have now on the Quest headsets. It was essentially everyone's worst fears after Facebook bought Oculus, seemingly coming completely fucking true. Nobody had any faith in Facebook, of all companies, to push VR forward, and people were scared we'd no longer get high-end headsets as a part of this acquisition, which, after the Rift S announcement, it seemed like that was exactly the case. I remember the reaction to the Rift S announcement being filled with hatred, and plenty of hardcore VR users chiming in to say, "This thing fucking sucks. Where are the varifocal lenses? Anything less than 90 Hz is useless, and inside-out tracking? You can't even put your hands behind your back. This thing is the biggest piece of shit of all time. Dead on arrival. Fuck you." And based on what was available at the time, I don't think it's that crazy to think this way. I was actually also guilty of this, fully believing the Rift S wouldn't hold up, and I didn't even have a single VR headset yet, aside from Google Cardboard, my goat. But then the headset actually came out, and suddenly it was a much different story. Turns out, inside-out tracking is actually pretty freaking awesome, dude. It did a pretty good job at tracking your hands, and while it does have blind spots, like behind your back, how often are you actually interacting with your hands behind your back in VR? And for those games that put holsters on your back, the tracking would work well enough for it to not be a problem at all. Since you don't need precise hand control behind your back to quickly grab something, the estimations done with the limited gyro information did more than enough to get the job done. It also turns out that while LCD isn't as colorful as OLED, it's less prone to the phenomenon commonly referred to as the screen door effect. So while OLED was still generally considered better, LCD wasn't that bad at all and resulted in a cheaper device overall. And hey, 80 Hz is fine as well in practice. 90 is still for sure better, but 80 is a good budget option. The Rift S was plagued with issues, but a lot of them were things like a cable that easily broke and the audio sucking complete ass. But overall, this headset shifted a lot of people's perspective of what VR needed and proved you can actually have a decent tracking experience with inside-out tracking. This was what essentially resulted in the existence of Windows Mixed Reality as well, which all had inside-out tracking that was much worse than the Rift S's tracking, but still could get the job done and was a fairly okay budget option. So now the consensus shifted from outside-in tracking being a requirement to being the more enthusiast high-end option that wasn't required but was still preferred, and the Rift S was the new gold standard. Generally, people's minds were now, okay, as long as the headset is connected to a powerful gaming machine and hits at least 80 Hz, it's fine. Base stations are better, but inside-out tracking is fine. Nothing less than this though. This is as low as we go. In September of 2018, Oculus announced the Quest, a VR headset that ran on an old shitty Android processor and maxed out at 72 Hz. It outsold every headset available at the time. It's an interesting lesson that just because there's a loud majority of people, that doesn't mean that they're always right. The Quest being affordable, not requiring a PC, and having generally pretty good tracking showed that VR doesn't necessarily even need a PC for a good experience. It doesn't even need to run at 90 Hz, even if that is the standard in the modern day. It was truly something special to see the consensus change so rapidly about what was needed for VR. From it being this $1,000 setup that required drilling holes in your wall, to it being something you could fit in your bag was wild. But even with the big innovations made, base stations still remained king for years to come. The Valve Index would eventually come out in 2019, doubling down on the base station setup, and as inside-out tracking got better, base stations became less important to the experience, but overall was still the only way to use some accessories like full body tracking and to use those fancy high-end Valve Index controllers with finger tracking. Inside-out tracking was definitely slowly on its way to take over the standard for VR though, while base stations remain the high-end solution for people willing to spend more for the absolute best-in-class experience. And for a long while, that's how things stayed, with devices like the Big Screen Beyond being $1,000 and requiring base stations to go with it. But fast forward to the modern day, and base stations, along with every other outside-in camera tracking solution, have essentially reached the end of their lives. Every modern headset, from Meta's Quest headsets to the PlayStation VR 2, use inside-out tracking, and even Valve, who were essentially the base station's biggest supporter, don't even manufacture them anymore. And now, with the Steam frame, base stations aren't even a supported option if you already own them, with Valve stating that they see the Steam frame as a fundamental shift in the way they see VR. It's no longer about making the most immersive experience possible, but rather the best bang for your buck. And that's a good thing. However, those Steam frame controllers are exclusive to the tracking on the Steam frame. So when those insanely delicate index controllers of yours finally kick the bucket, you'll have no choice but to leave your base stations behind, as the index, and every aspect of it, is no longer being made. The last pillar keeping base stations alive is full body tracking, but with things like Flux Pose, which if they wind up being as good as promised, would be better than base station track solutions like Tundras and Vive trackers, essentially instantly killing them off. The Flux Poses are more versatile and cheaper, and because of this, base stations don't have very long before getting unplugged for good. It's weird to think that in a way, the technically superior tracking method is being left behind. With inside-out tracking, you still don't get that perfect tracking behind your back you'd get with base stations, but ultimately, in the name of convenience, and with inside-out tracking being close enough in tracking quality to the base stations, they simply aren't worth the price or the hassle when inside-out tracking is as good as it is, and even Valve agrees now. Which, if anyone were to keep base stations alive, it would have been them. It's also sad to think that base stations are going to die off without ever getting a single controller that was a sort of gold standard. It was either index controllers that are super prone to drift and have horrid quality control, or Vive wands which essentially fucking suck at everything. What was once considered the King's VR setup has now essentially become a relic of the past. Rest in peace, base stations. I'll never forget when I fucked up the hole I drilled in my room at like 15 and my base station fell face first on tile floor, and I just stared at it while I sat in the realization that I wasted both my Christmas and birthday money on some bullshit that is probably not only broken, but also probably left little glass pieces all over my fucking floor. To my surprise, it still worked perfectly and is actually still one of the base stations I use now. It was a pleasure being able to put my hands behind my back with perfect tracking, but never actually using that at all because you never need to do that at all ever, and Oculus was completely right about inside-out tracking from the start. I'm sorry, but Facebook, you win this time. Now, if you guys could politely ask FluxPose to give me an early unit so I can kill off my fuck-ass base stations quicker, I'd greatly appreciate it. This is a bit, by the way. Please don't be annoying and spam them or anything. They're not going to give mini bitch-ass Lop a free unit. Now it's time for question of the day. HTC Vibe. Sure, man. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like this one, talking about the hardware and software quality control issues with VR. It's a pretty interesting one, and if you're just gonna scroll on your phone or play something with YouTube in the background anyway, you might as well have that one playing in the background. You can get 20% off the entire Quest store from now until January 1st using the link in the description. It's genuinely the best way to support the channel, and it's because of you guys using that link that I am able to make these videos and not rely on something like a Patreon. With all of that garbage out of the way, I will catch you guys in the next one. See you later, fat bitches. Bye-bye.